Okay, so are you ready to talk unusual elections?
Yeah.
Because we are diving into some brand new polling data today. And it really kind of flips the script on how we think American politics works.
Absolutely.
We're talking like favorability ratings that just throw you for a loop and campaigns that might just rewrite the rule book on who votes for who.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating.
Yeah.
And lucky for us, we have expert speaker here to help us break it all down. So you ready to unpack this?
I am so ready. Let's do this.
Okay, so let's jump right in with this poll from the Associated Press, right?
Yeah.
51% favorability for Kamala Harris. I mean, a net positive rating. You almost never see that these days.
It really is unusual. And it is a stark contrast to where Donald Trump is sitting right now at only 40%.
Yeah.
That's a pretty significant gap.
Yeah, a full 18 points. What are we seeing here? Like, is this real?
It's definitely noteworthy. It's unusual to say the least. Even in other Western democracies where you often see leaders with lower approval ratings, they can still win elections. But this net positive rating for Harris, it suggests something different might be happening this time around.
Yeah, it's like voters are actually liking her, which is a wild thought. But, okay, what's even more interesting to me is the economy. You think that would be a slam dunk for Trump, right? But these poll numbers paint a different picture.
Yeah, they really do. It seems voters are putting more trust in Harris on those core economic issues. You know, middle-class taxes, jobs, and unemployment housing costs. It's a pretty significant shift.
It is. So while the poll did show Trump with a slight edge on groceries and tariffs, those numbers were within the margin of error. So,
yeah, that margin of error always trips people up.
yeah, what does that mean exactly? For those of us who need a little refresher.
Basically, it means the difference between those two candidates was so small it could just be statistical noise, not a reliable indicator of who's actually ahead.
Okay, so not exactly a glowing endorsement for either candidate on those issues. But still, with costs going up everywhere, you'd think the economy would be a point of weakness for Harris. Instead, it seems like she's connecting with voters even on issues that might normally favor the other side. How is she doing that?
Well, a lot of analysts suggest that Harris is really making an effort to broaden her appeal. You know, going beyond that traditional Democratic base and targeting voters who may have voted Republican in the past.
It really makes you wonder if those old party lines are becoming less important to voters. Are we moving into an era where it's more about the issues than the party?
It's an interesting question. And Harris's actions seem to be saying yes to that. Take, for example, her appearance with Liz Cheney in Wisconsin, which, as we know, is a traditionally red state.
Yeah.
That sent a powerful message.
Talk about a power move. Appearing with a Republican like Liz Cheney, who comes from a serious political dynasty, what kind of message do you think that sends?
It tells voters that she's serious about building a bipartisan coalition, appealing to people across the political spectrum, and it's a really stark contrast to Trump's approach.
Right, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because political commentator Charlie Sykes, who has written a ton about the Republican Party, and he recently pointed out this contrast too. He argues that Trump is content with his base, while Harris is actively trying to grow hers beyond traditional Democratic voters. And her focus on things like housing affordability, specifically those proposed $25,000 grants for first-time homebuyers. That could be a big part of that strategy.
Especially with all the anxiety around inflation and rising rent prices. We've all seen those reports about what's happening in Nevada, for instance. Rents have just skyrocketed. And the polls show that a lot of Americans are worried about the economy, particularly when it comes to housing costs.
So it's a smart move for Harris to address those fears head on. Let's get back to Liz Cheney for a sec. This isn't just about a Democrat and a Republican on stage together. This is about a prominent Republican endorsing Kamala Harris. What kind of impact did this have on the election?
Well, I think it's huge. Having a figure like Cheney break from the Republican Party to endorse Harris, it really underscores this idea that we could be seeing a shift in traditional voting patterns.
Like maybe this election isn't just about Democrat versus Republican anymore.
Exactly. Cheney's endorsement gives credibility to Harris's attempts to build that broader coalition. It's going to be really interesting to see how much of an impact it has come Election Day.
It makes you wonder, is this a one-off, or are we going to see more Republicans breaking ranks this year? Could this be a sign of things to come, like a shift in how these parties operate?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's certainly possible that Cheney's endorsement could inspire other Republicans to do the same, especially those who are feeling disillusioned with the direction of their party.
It all points to how important those undecided voters are in this election.
Absolutely. They have a lot of power in a race this close. And they're the ones who are going to be hearing the most from these candidates in these final weeks.
And probably getting bombarded with ads and speeches and all sorts of campaign craziness.
Exactly. So it's more important than ever to really be careful about what you're seeing and hearing.
Yeah, don't just take everything at face value.
Right. Look beyond the headlines and those little sound bites. Think about where that information is coming from. What are their motivations? Are they giving you the whole picture? Or are they trying to push a certain agenda?
Basically, you got to channel your inner fact checker.
Exactly. The more informed you are, the better equipped you'll be to cut through all that noise and make decisions that line up with your own values and what you care about.
Which, let's be honest, can be really hard. There's just so much information out there these days. And it's not always easy to tell what's reliable. It can be overwhelming, even for someone like me who really enjoys following this stuff.
It's true. We're dealing with information overload. It's more important now than ever to be critical thinkers and to keep a healthy bit of skepticism, especially when it comes to something as big as a presidential election.
Absolutely. So as we head into these last few weeks before the election, what's your biggest takeaway from all of this? What should our listener who's been with us this whole time really be paying attention to?
I think what I find most interesting is this potential shift away from traditional politics. Those old playbooks might not work as well as they used to. Voters seem to be looking for something different.
Right. It's not just about Democrat versus Republican anymore. There are other things going on, deeper issues that people really care about.
Exactly. This election could come down to which candidate can connect with those voters who are still trying to figure things out. Those who are tired of the same old arguments and just want to see some real solutions.
You've given us a lot to think about today. Any last thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
If there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from all of this, it's to stay engaged, stay informed, and stay curious. This is a really important moment, and every voice matters.
It really makes you think, huh? Like, are we watching the old rules of politics get thrown out the window?
It's definitely possible. And, these voters are facing some big questions right now. Inflation, housing, the role of government. They want solutions, not just the same old talking points.
Yeah, and maybe they're getting tired of just picking a side. Maybe they're looking for candidates who really get what matters to them, regardless of party.
Yeah, it's something we've been talking about a lot. And this election, with these candidates and everything that makes it so unique, it could be pointing to something bigger, a real change in how American politics works.
You've given us a lot to consider today, expert speaker. This deep dive has been really eye-opening. So as we wrap up here, what's your biggest takeaway? What should our listener be paying attention to in these last couple weeks?
For me, the most important thing is seeing how these trends play out. Will we see more candidates trying to build these broader coalitions? Like, will we see more Harris-Cheney situations? Or will things go back to the way they were, with everyone just sticking to their party?
So are we watching a big shift in how things work, or just a temporary change? I guess we'll find out.
Exactly. It's like a political experiment in real time. And the results could change things for a long time.
Wow. It's a lot to take in. But that's the deep dive for you. We go deep, we try to make sense of it all, and hopefully we all come out a little more informed.
That's the goal. And ready to tackle these big issues, whatever they may be.
I like it. A huge thank you to expert speaker for guiding us through this wild world of elections. And to you, our listeners, thanks for joining us. Remember to stay curious, stay informed, and get out there and vote. Your voice really does matter. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.